Joint Scrutiny Committee on the 18th of July. This meeting will be live streamed and a recording made available to view via Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website. To the agenda, members. Agenda item 1, to receive apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Eade, Councillor Teresa Parry, Councillor Priest, Councillor Janine Reid, Councillor Skivens and Councillor Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we go for a roll call?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Adams.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Aldworth.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Angel.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Bishop.
Emma.
Councillor Broughton Pettit.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Chacon-Dawson.
Present.
Councillor Chapman.
Present.
Councillor Cook. Councillor Cushing. Councillor Cuss.
Present.
Councillor Elizabeth Davis. Councillor Tudor Davis. Councillor Dix. Councillor Ellsbury. Councillor Enright.
Present.
Councillor Etheridge.
Present.
Councillor Evans. Councillor Freena Childs.
Present.
Councillor Christine Forehead. Councillor Fussell. Councillor Gare.
Present.
Councillor Gordon. Councillor Heron.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Hussey.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Ingram Jones.
Present.
Councillor James. Councillor Jeremiah.
Present.
Just be quiet.
Councillor Johnson.
Emma.
Councillor Jan Jones.
Present.
Councillor Kent. Councillor Ariana Leonard. Councillor Mann. Councillor McConnell.
Present.
Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Owen.
Present.
Councillor Phipps. Councillor Powell.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Hayden Pritchard.
Emma.
Councillor Judith Pritchard.
Emma.
Councillor Rayo. Councillor Roberts.
Emma.
Councillor Sorrellis.
Present.
Councillor Scriven. Councillor Simmons.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Whitcomb.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Whittle. Councillor Shane Williams.
Present.
Councillor Walter Williams.
Present. Could I inform you, Chair, please? I have to leave about 6:15. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Winslade.
Present.
Councillor Woodland.
Present.
Councillor Wright.
Present.
And just quickly go through the co-opting members. Martin Weston. Tracy Millington.
Present.
Gerwin James. Delwyn Davis. And Kimberly Cole. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, you haven't called my name out and I'm in the meeting. Councillor Haas.
Thanks, Councillor Haas. We had you down for an apology, so I'll put you cross the apologies out and put you as attending. Thank you, Councillor Haas.
Okay, members, item 2, declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda. In accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 3, corporate performance assessment end of year report 2023-24. Councillor Jamie Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Before you this evening, members, is the Council's corporate performance assessment for the 2023-2024 financial year. It contains a wide range of information designed to give you and our residents a snapshot of how the Council did last year against many of the aspects of Council business. It's an opportunity for members to challenge areas of underperformance and, perhaps as importantly, celebrate and challenge us on how our success can be further improved. The dashboard contains information on the Council's finances, workforce, risks over the last 12 months, but also a director's summary that captures what has gone well and areas of improvement across 5 areas, namely education, social care, economy and environment, housing and corporate services. In order to maximise opportunities for questions and challenge from all members of the Joint Scrutiny Committee, you will shortly hear from directors who will introduce 3 positives and 3 areas for improvement across each director's summary to bring you some of the key points to light. Once all the directors have introduced their summary sheets, we'll have the opportunity to ask any questions. Before the directors have their opportunity to speak, I'd also like to remind members that our performance management approach is currently being refined, and there will be a new process and set of dashboards in use over the coming months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Ross, as the author of the report, do you want to say anything before I go to the directors?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, first up then is Mr. Richard Edmonds, please.
Thank you, Chair. Do my best to bring this to life. As Councillor Pritchard just referenced, we're going to highlight 3 things that have gone well in 3 areas that we may want to see some improvements in as things move forward. So in terms of education, members will be aware that we've recently undergone our local education authority inspection. We're looking forward to sharing the outcome of that with you in September. But in the run up to that, there were 3 particular areas that really kind of did perform very well for us. You'll appreciate that we have a lot of schools in Caerphilly, 87 in total. And one of the best ways of assessing our performance and where we are in terms of education is the profile of our ESTIN inspections. So that profile is very good. We have a very small number of schools in categories, but perhaps more impressively over recent months is we've started to see quite a number of the inspections of our schools generate best practice case studies within education. So not only are we now certain that we are performing well in this space, but we're actually starting to demonstrate to other schools in other LAs some of that practice. Second area I'd like to highlight, Chair, is around our revised attendance strategy and the impact it's starting to have on attendance rates. I think it's fair to say we're still not where we want to be, but we've seen some really strong progress made, particularly in the last 12 months or so. So we're now in a position where we rank 13th in Wales for performance. But if you include our demographic makeup, essentially we should be performing at around 21st. So we're punching well above our weight in terms of overall attendance. And we've now got, I believe it's 23 schools that are back to attendance rates that were similar to pre-COVID. So we're making good inroads in terms of attendance. And as you'd appreciate, getting children and learners into the classroom means we have a better opportunity at improving their life chances. And the third area I'd like to raise, Chair, is around our safeguarding procedures. We consider these to be very strong, a real strength for the Education Directorate, but also the organisation as a whole. And I referenced earlier our inspection, and we look forward to bringing some of that to life when the opportunity arises early in September. But for all the positives, we've also got to share some of the areas where we might want to improve things. members across the chamber will recognise that we've had some challenges with our exclusion rates in Caerphilly for some time. I think it's fair to say that other local authorities across Wales are now similarly having those challenges, but nonetheless, they remain too high for us and a source of concern and focus. We've also seen, I think it's an interesting one to position this. So schools are struggling to implement the full breadth of the ALN Act. There's a whole heap of stuff that schools have to do in this regard. What we're seeing through conversations with schools and our regulators is actually they're doing really well. But I think it's fair to say that the pressure that's being brought to bear on our head teachers and school staff in that space is pretty significant, and it's one for us certainly to keep an eye on. And I think the last point I'd raise around education, Chair, is we are seeing increasingly the impact of public sector finances, not just on local authorities like ourselves, but also on our schools. And that does mean that some of our schools are heading towards deficit positions. But what we do have in Caerphilly is a really strong track record of using a tool called Team Around the School, which gets professionals from across the local authority around the table with our schools to try and address those specific challenges based on the relevant contexts that each school presents. And I think you'll appreciate many of those contexts can be quite different. So those are the three the three highlights and the three areas for improvement across education, Chair. And if it's okay with you, I'll pass straight over to Dave now.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Mr. Street, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll just take the opportunity to undertake a very similar process to Ed's just followed in respect of Caerphilly Homes and our Housing Directorate, if that's okay, Chair.
Yep.
In terms of the areas that went well, full planning permission achieved for around 130 new homes at Oakdale and Tydarran, and on site with Tydarran, a subject very dear to my own heart. It was more than 10 years ago that the council actually closed the home for the elderly we had in Risca at Tydarran. I don't think any of us at that time envisaged it would take 10 years for that matter to come to fruition. I'm delighted to say that it has. And you'll all be acutely aware of the pressures that we face as a local authority, both in terms of homelessness and people looking for new homes. And the fact that we've got those around 130 new homes in situ and coming on stream is very, very positive and will make a huge difference to those people who are fortunate enough to end up in those homes. In this chamber over many, many years, there has been concern expressed around empty properties in the borough and what as a local authority could we do to actually bring some of those empty homes back onto the housing market, whether that's for private rental or indeed for sale. We have now, in the past 12 months, completed our first enforced sale, where we have worked with actual property owners and insisted those properties be put on the market and no longer to be left dormant. A very difficult, a very long-winded and elaborate process that has to be followed. But I'm sure that now we've had those first successes, we've done an awful lot of learning from those. And we'll be able to roll out that kind of activity far more, perhaps efficiently than we've been able to do up until now. And likewise, we've also secured funding for participation in the National Empty Homes Grant Scheme, a facility where we will be able to make sums of money available to property owners, again, in terms of empty properties, in order that they can bring those properties back into the market, back into the private rental market, and actually begin to see some of the pressures that we've got in housing beginning to dissipate. I think it's fair to say over the last 12 months, the whole agenda around people in temporary accommodation and homelessness has become far more acute than it's become previously. That has brought enormous pressures on us, both in terms of workload, in terms of workforce, and indeed in terms of finance. The bill that we have for keeping in people in temporary accommodation in this authority is quite significant. And the sooner we're able to chip away at that, the better. And I'm sure that some of the things that I've referenced, and indeed many of the things on that list that I haven't referenced to date, will make a big contribution towards that. In terms of what we could do a little better, we still have a significant backlog of repairs and voids. That has improved significantly from where we found ourselves at the end of the COVID pandemic, where obviously everything other than what were emergency repairs put on hold. So we are beginning to work our way through that and make our way into that waiting list. But if I'm honest, not at a pace and a scale that I would like. So that is something that we would have to pay more attention to. Our internal workforce is under immense pressure, and we are struggling in key areas. Surveyors are certainly an area where we are finding it very, very difficult to compete with other registered social landlords and indeed the private sector. And in some of our tradespeople, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, etc., there is a very, very vibrant private employment market out there. So we're having to work really, really hard in terms of recruitment and retention of those staff, because clearly they are going to be fundamental in doing some of the stuff I spoke about a little earlier. And finally, from my point of view, there are issues within terms of our customer service, how easy or difficult it is for people to get through to some parts of housing needs to improve significantly. And we're actively working on that as I speak. And in terms of the current financial year, we're having to make some tough decisions on how we improve our service delivery while ensuring the quality of those homes is as good as it can possibly be. There is often a pressure and a conflicting pressure between putting a roof over someone's head and making sure that roof is to the appropriate standard. We haven't always got that balance right, and that is something that we are looking at as we speak. But obviously, if we're in a position where we simply prioritise putting a roof over someone's head and we haven't got the quality, if that property is vacated and then rehoused several times, over a period of time, the quality of our housing stock will deteriorate quite significantly. They are difficult dilemmas. When you've got people there who are crying out for a roof over their head, there is always a temptation to resolve that matter first. But what we want to do is to accommodate people in accommodation that not only is fit for purpose, but actually accommodation that they can be proud of. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, I've got Mr. Jenkins. Is it on my list, Gareth?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So for social care, the three highlights that we wanted to raise were related to the numbers of looked after children have remained relatively stable, and actually during the course of the year have actually shown a small decrease. And the number of children on the Child Protection Register has actually decreased quite significantly. That would suggest that our preventative and family support services are effective, but we know that it's a volatile situation and it can change quite rapidly. So it's good news, but we're watching it and monitoring it very closely. The second area is that the overall hours of domiciliary care waiting to be allocated has dropped steadily throughout the year and is now around 70 hours a week, which is a significant drop, and that's despite the ongoing fragility in the social care, dom care arena. And the third point that we wanted to make is that the whole directorate has continued to meet increasing demand and increasing complexity of the referrals that we're receiving, maintaining positive performance at the same time. In terms of priorities looking forward, the first one is a key issue for us is the procurement and implementation of a new social care IT system, which has got risks both financially and operationally. Operationally in terms of performance reporting and recording, but financially we're not quite sure what that's going to look like going forward and how much support we're going to get from Welsh Government with that. We need to maintain a continued focus on our retention and recruitment of both staff and carers, and that's carers across both adults and children's services. And the final point is that we need to just acknowledge that we have to continue to manage increasing demand and increasing pressures within a standstill budget for the first time ever. There is no growth in our budget going forward as a result of mobilising Team Caerphilly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mark Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously the Economy Environment Directorate. So first thing I will say is just in terms of size and scale, in terms of the number of services operated by the directorate is pretty significant. And when I wrote my director's summary, I was kind of blown away by the just again sheer size and scale of the stuff that had been delivered. But just focusing on three things that went well initially. So we were into the second year of the Shared Prosperity Fund, of three-year funding programme. When that was launched by UK government, there was some quite challenging timescales attached to it. However, the flexibility that they've given local authorities has been fantastic in terms of delivering. That delivers across three pillars: supporting business, communities and place, and something called multiply. And you know, in year two, against some pretty challenging background of timescale, we got £8.6 million out the door, and, you know, and some great success stories, particularly around the supporting business pillar, for example. So that went well. We're in year three now, and we're waiting to hear from Westminster what will happen with the SPF moving forward. Second one I'd like to highlight is the authority continued its investment in some pretty significant pieces of infrastructure. You know, and we delivered that quite successfully. I'll just give some examples: 3G pitches, hockey hub at Ystrymynach, Cwmgwyddon Primary School, planning consent for the Caerphilly Leisure and Wellbeing Hub was secured. A number of other education build and improvement projects around sort of education and early years. So again, you know, a lot delivered in terms of some pretty significant infrastructure and investment across the borough. And then the third one I want to highlight is our preparation of a new draft waste strategy. That was prepared in the sort of latter half of 2023, moving towards the end of 2023. And then we did a very, very extensive public consultation on it in the early part of the last quarter of the last financial year, the early part of 2024. And obviously this Joint Scrutiny Committee considered the outcome of that consultation in recent weeks. Just in terms of items that perhaps didn't go so well and need some improvement. Last year, there were significant challenges in our fleet management service, largely due to staff resource issues, the inability to recruit and retain staff. That culminated in the service appearing on our corporate risk register as a red risk because of the importance of the fleet service in underpinning, you know, all of our frontline services. So that was a real challenge last year, and you know, hopefully you will see as this year goes on, you know, that situation's improved, but a real challenge last year. Last year was our first attempt, the Park Service first attempt at a formal No Mow May process, which is the national initiative. First attempt, we were never ever going to perhaps get everything right. We probably got a little bit more wrong than we got right last year. But then in the latter half of the year, autumn of 2023, we worked through with members to kind of change that regime, ready for this cutting season. So, you know, again, first time we did it, it wasn't great, but hopefully, you know, the lessons learned have proven to be effective this year. And then finally, and this is a fairly big one for the council, the progress on our second replacement local development plan was halted last year. We weren't the only authority because of objections raised by Welsh Government to the growth scenario that was used in preparing that LDP. That resulted in us and Monmouthshire jointly leading some work regionally to do a piece of work across the Cardiff capital region, looking at the growth scenarios that have been used and applied to LDPs. That work is now concluded, and that actually has proved that our growth scenario was correct, and you will be due to receive a report as full council next week on the new delivery timetable for that replacement local development plan. So really important strategy for this council that has suffered a fairly significant hiccup over the last year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms Williams. Back to once is never enough sometimes. Mr Edmonds again.
Trust me, Chair, once would have been enough, but thank you for bringing me back in. So this is
Well, answer questions as well, mate.
I know. I'll be brief, I promise. This is the corporate services highs and areas for improvement. So first one I want to focus in on, it won't have passed members by that we now have a new corporate plan for the period 23 to 2028. That was a really extensive piece of work that was done across an extended period. And I think what was most pleasing was we had Audit Wales sat alongside us through the development of that plan. And the work that they did confirmed that actually we'd engaged a really impressive way of framing that corporate plan, but also they tested whether we had applied the sustainable development principle, which is at the core of everything they do, and concluded that we had. So again, that was a great piece of work and lots of contributions from members as well as officers. Second thing I want to just highlight is the successful implementation of the universal free school meals offer across the council's infant and primary schools. This was a massive challenge across Wales, and I think what was most impressive about the way that we managed this here in Caerphilly was the sheer breadth of that. So we're at a position where all of those schools could offer that in plenty of time, and I think what we're starting to see as well is increases in the level of take-up across those schools. And then the last area I'd like to highlight, often unsung, is digital services. So we managed in the last 12 months to successfully implement the council tax and HR systems in terms of a migration to cloud. I think I often share with members that one of the highlights of a corporate service implementation is that no one notices. That doesn't mean that work like that isn't incredibly complex and challenging. But to move your HR system and your council tax system to the cloud in the same year is pretty damn impressive. So again, would be wrong of me not to have highlighted that. Moving on to the areas that didn't go so well, albeit Audit Wales were very pleased with our corporate plan development, they were less pleased, not just locally, but nationally, with the way in which performance information and service user perspectives are used by senior leaders in terms of decision making. We had 3 recommendations for improvement in that report, as did many other local authorities. I'm pleased to say, Chair, we're making good progress in terms of how we address that. Part of that will be a new performance management framework, part of which you're kind of seeing the back end of the last one this evening. But that was something that I think got everybody to sit up and take notice. Second one then is around customer contact. I think it's fair to say there's been many comments in this chamber about the challenges sometimes of accessing certain parts of the organisation via the telephone. That is something that we accept and we are attempting to remedy through the contact management project within Mobilising Team Caerphilly. But I couldn't sit here this evening and say that had gone well, so it was important I raised that. And I think that goes for the last point I'd want to raise as well. Although it comes through under people services and isn't corporate services specific, it would be remiss of me not to recognise that our authority-wide sickness absence levels are not where we need them to be at this point. We've seen a half a full-time equivalent reduction across the last couple of days, which is, across the last 2 years, which is a positive direction of travel, but by no means has it been as large a shift as we would like. So again, I suspect there may be some questions on that. I wanted to just get that tabled. And that's me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before I go to questions, I'm going to start off on education, and it would be amiss of me as the local councillor and the governor not to mention that a certain Newbridge High was School of the Year. So very, very proud for us. I know what covers, it's not just on marks, it covers a lot of different things, but still a good achievement. First one, so we're very proud anyway. So, okay, members, first up is Councillor Judith Pritchard, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. I've got 3 issues that I want to raise, and the first one I think is communications and customer service, which I think would be for Mr. Edmonds. And once again, I'm afraid I have to complain about the size of the print that this agenda was sent to us in. Very, very small print. Obviously, I'm visually impaired, but I think probably other members have had difficulty reading it. I take it that members are also customers, and it's important that we should be presented with documents that are not too difficult to read. Well, you can, and I have, enlarge the print, and then in order to read the sentence, you have to switch from the left-hand arrow to the right-hand arrow to get it all in. It's very laborious and takes ages. And I did raise this last time. I'm very disappointed that we've been served with the same old layout. It's a question of layout and redesigning the layout for the agenda. And please, will you do it properly for next time, so that people like myself and everybody else can actually read the thing without too much difficulty. So maybe Mr. Edmonds would like to answer that, and I hope give me an assurance. And then I've got two other questions, one about social care and one about housing. So can I have the answer to that first?
Okay, someone.
Yeah, I'm happy
Mr.
to take
Edmonds?
that, Chair. Yeah, I acknowledge that, Councillor Pritchard. I remain hopeful that as we move into the new performance management arrangements, what you'll see will be much more accessible to members. And in terms of the text size as well, that's an adjustment that we should be able to make. So apologies for not having done that this time.
Thank you. Well, you probably have to change the layout as well. On housing and the voids, and it's a good thing that we've been able to bring private housing, sort of abandoned private housing in disrepair, into service. But I think a thing that worries the general public much more, and certainly is mentioned to myself, is the number of voids we've got. I mean, we've got all these homeless people, and we've got voids, and I appreciate the fact that they need to wait and we haven't got electricians, etc., etc. But I think there must be something we can do to speed up the process of repairing them and prioritise that. The other thing I think is that maybe we're spending perhaps too much attention to the 104 houses we've brought into service, and not enough attention, nothing like enough attention to the large number of voids that we've got. So perhaps I could have an answer to that. And then I've got another question on social care.
Yeah, Mr. Street, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. I think your point around voids is a legitimate one. We do have a lot of voids. I'm pleased to say that the number of voids that we do have are falling. But like you, I'm sure they're not falling as quickly as we all would like, but we're doing what we can. There is an element of workforce where you've only got as many staff as you've got. When if you don't got those, you have to commission those services from the private sector. They're not always easily available. We're going in the right direction. We would like the priorities even further. There is some tension on occasions between dealing with those voids and other initiatives that we've got going forward. Is in everyone's interest that we bring those numbers down, and I'm confident that we'll continue with the progress that we've seen over the last 6 months. Thanks,
Okay,
Chair.
I will bring in Councillor Cook as well. The
No,
cabinet
sorry.
member.
I did have another question.
Let me bring the cabinet member. You want to answer
Okay,
your
all
question
right,
as well,
okay.
please, Judith.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Cook, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Go turn my camera off because I'm having problems with my internet. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pritchard, for your comments in relation to the voids. I completely agree. It's true we have a high number of unusual voids, and that's due to a number of reasons, which effectively, cause delays in the property being occupied. Well, following the pandemic, like Dave has already mentioned, there's an inability for officers to actually access the properties, which caused a massive backlog in surveys on voids. We've also now have to perform 33 WHQS compliance checks on a void. And following new WHQS 23 compliance checks, we've got to perform 44. There's further changes in WHQS 23, which means we must now provide full decoration and flooring, which has a minimum of 2 weeks on works. There's also an issue with the supply of flooring, which is not just regarding us, it's regarding all housing sector across Wales. We're now installing environmental sensors in our voids, which is helping our contract holders tackle fuel poverty, and it also helps them stop damp and mould, which then saves us time on repairs. And to be compliant with WHQS 23, we need to create energy pathways for all our properties. So we start now with our voids. We're beginning that process with the voids. And I've been having meetings with the head of housing and head of repairs and maintenance regarding the voids. And they've explained to me that to tackle the issue, they've created a new procedure for voids to try to speed the process up. And they've upskilled and provided new training to the surveyors along with new technology. But I'm more than happy to set a meeting up with Councillor Pitcher and any other councillors who want to chat about the voids, because it's not as simple as turn them around very quickly. It's a very complicated process. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Okay, Councillor
Thank you. And
Pritchard.
the last thing was social care. I'm very upset, really, to hear that there's no money for demographic growth. This is a major issue, and of course, it impinges on the health service. I'm afraid I've said this before, but I'm saying it again. So this will affect delayed discharges. People can't get out of hospital because social care local authorities are not able to provide the packages that they need to be discharged safely, which increases the waiting lists. Now, in the King's speech yesterday, I know that's Westminster and Welsh Government are in charge of health and local authorities in Wales, but there obviously is going to be a big push on bringing down waiting lists. Maybe some money or some extra money will come from Westminster to Welsh Government. Well, we need to keep an eye on that and, make sure that we get our fair share if there is any money available. But I think we should prioritise this, and we'll take the money from elsewhere if necessary in Council's budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard, and I'm sure everyone in this room and everyone listening is hoping we will get that money as well. Mr. Jenkins, do you want to answer?
Yeah, thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. I mean, really important points that you're raising there. I think it's important to just acknowledge that the known growth within social care across adults and children's has been funded to date, and the expectation is that going forward, that any additional growth will be managed within the budget. When members look at the budget reports, at some point, you will see that there has been consistent underspend within social care. That's not a position that we're comfortable with either, because that's because of vacancies and other issues within the service. But we have been managing within the budget that's been allocated. I know Jo Williams is on the line. I think she would be able to give you reassurance that it hasn't impacted on hospital discharge to date. And I don't know, Jo, whether there is anything you wanted to add.
Okay, Miss Williams, what?
Yeah, I just confirm, actually, I've just come off our Pathway to Care delay reporting, which used to be known as DTOC, and there is nobody this month waiting for a package of care. The numbers have dropped considerably. As Gareth said earlier, we're on about 78 hours, and I would say that's normal working time. Those people haven't been waiting long. So at the moment, it isn't impacting on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, both. Councillor Dix, please, next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just two questions, if I can. One of them was on the empty properties. Back in May, I wrote to the council, and the figure I had was 324 empty properties across Caerphilly, which is considerably higher than the 104 private properties that we're talking about there. And I was just wondering, what is the figure now currently? Are we how much lower than 324 are we? And then the second one was on the schools. It's really good that children attended schools more rather than truancy, which is excellent for for society in general and the youngsters and their families included. But I was just wondering, as the actual exam results improved in the last couple of years, are more children leaving school with better grades, and are more children leaving school with grades, exams, passing their exams than we previously had in the past? Because one of the main points about going to school is to make people educated, good citizens, and employable, and we can only do that if they got the skills to meet the employment. So I just wondered if we have improved our exam results in Caerphilly.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Street up first, and then Mr. Edmonds next.
Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dix. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'll certainly get you them first thing in the morning. I think I'd fully accept that we're still not where we need to be in terms of empty properties. It is an absolute veritable minefield to uncover. Some of these properties have been empty for an awful long time. They're empty for various reasons. They can be subject to family disputes. They can be subject to probate disputes. They really do some unpicking. And I think the fact that we've been able to make as much progress as we have over the last 12 months on that, one of the things that's come out that has an awful lot of learning for us in just, where we can perhaps do these things a little quicker in some areas, and where there are some empty properties that, quite frankly, it isn't worth us putting our efforts into, because they are so complex that it will just be disproportionate amount of effort to bring them back online. Chair, I've just seen Councillor Cook.
I've seen Councillor Cook just come up,
and
so I'll
and
go with
knowing
Councillor
Shane, he's
Cook
probably
first.
got that number I haven't got. So no pressure, Shane.
On you then, Shane. Before
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, Chair. I haven't got that number now, so but I just want to add that it's like what Dave says. It's really complicated. It's not as simple as finding the property empty, getting the team to engage, and getting that property back into use. But the team have performed miracles. They've won awards. To bring one to for sale is such a difficult process to go through. But I'm proud. I've been focusing on this since I've become a cabinet member for housing. We've used reserves to create this dedicated empty properties team. Most councils across Wales haven't got an empty properties team. And to me, the important part of housing and tackling the housing crisis is bringing these empties back into use. I think in England, 1 in every 25 properties is empty, which is disgusting, and it's got to be. We've got to target it. The empty properties team have engaged with over 434 properties over the last 2 years, which have been vacant over the last 2 years, and I just think it's brilliant. And I'm going to back them, and the cabinet back them, and we'll do all we can to get these numbers down in Caerphilly. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just, sorry, Chair, I think they're answering the wrong question.
Yeah,
the question I asked was about the council properties, the 324 council properties that are empty. What is the figure now on the
void?
Empty
Sorry,
council properties?
Yeah, the void is not 300, it's 260. I think it's from 260. So I have got that number, actually. I thought you were talking about the empties.
Thank you with that, then? You okay there, Nigel? Because you got your hand up again, haven't you? Okay. Brilliant. Right. I'll go to Ed then to get you your second question.
You like this, Chair.
Yeah.
Apologies, Councillor Dix. There is no straightforward answer in terms of whether our children are getting improved exam results, but I've had a quick exchange with Kerry, who's in a position to not answer this question far more eloquently than I could. So if it's okay with you, I'll hand over to her.
Okay, Miss Cole.
I'll try it.
Yeah.
So we've been advised, we're not dodging the question. We have been very strongly advised by Welsh Government and Estyn that we shouldn't collect results, aggregate them up into an LA figure and produce anything that could be misconstrued as any sort of league table. This has been the case for several years. When our inspection report is published in September, you will see the section on standards will repeat what I've just said, and you will see that Estyn make these judgments based on progress of learners from wherever point they start to wherever point they're assessed. And they're very careful to judge that on school inspection outcomes as well. So what I can tell you is if we're looking at that quite narrow part of academic outcomes, 6 secondary schools have been inspected since COVID, and five of those schools have been complemented on the progress of learners within that test cohort. So what we can say is that the standards in those 5 are strong, because Estyn say that. In one of those schools, they weren't deemed to be strong enough, and that's a school in a statutory category. 6 secondary schools remain uninspected since COVID, but of those 6 schools, none of those schools are causing concern at the moment because of their progress. So although we don't get that aggregated picture, we do get every autumn, we have an autumn series of meetings with secondary schools. I invite the head teacher, the chair of governors in, and we discuss the school's results in context, and we make a judgment around whether that school requires support or not. We don't just do that for exam outcomes, we do that for all aspects of the school in order to support. So, but we can't produce for you an aggregated table.
Okay, thanks for that. Very interesting. I find it absolutely, I'm shocked really that we don't keep exam results, and those figures are not for the public to see, not for elected members to see. When children leave school, they will need to have exam results to get the jobs with the qualifications they need to get jobs. But within the bizarre situation, it's not your fault, not the council's fault, but the people above deem that we're not supposed to keep figures. This is outrageous, and I think it doesn't help children at all. But that's my opinion.
That's not correct, Nigel. That's not actually correct.
That's not for us, but I'm just saying. Yeah.
No. Well, local schools do give out the figures to parents. I know mine does. Parents will know how the school is done. So they say that parents don't know, parents do know. It is just the Welsh Government is not asking all the schools, because you can't even compare yourself really to a family anymore. You know, these things are all changing within schools. Eston does not even take in your school results into consideration, because we just had an Eston inspection not that long ago. So it does happen. Okay there, Nigel, now, yeah? Okay. Councillor Miles, please.
Yes, we have to accept it, I suppose, but there we go.
Yeah, but if you ask your local school, they can give you results, how your school is doing. Because parents want to know that there, but parents will know. Okay, Councillor Mills, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, but I first wanted to comment briefly on the presentation of the report, because I have to say that I found the charts and summaries, the pictorial presentations, to be really useful in understanding where we are as a council, and also the individual sections presented by each directorate are very summarised very well and are very succinct and accessible. So thank you for whoever put the report together. I think it's really good.
I will pass on the thanks to Miss Roberts, because she compiled it all together. Not the directors, Miss Roberts has done this.
So thanks. Turning to my questions and referring to one of those very helpful charts that I saw on page 2, corporate complaints. I noticed that in the Economy and Environment Directorate, a large number of corporate complaints go to stage 2 before they're resolved. There's a large number of complaints, I know, but I'm not concerned about those because they also get a large number of compliments. So that's kind of nice to see. But why are these complaints going to stage 2? And is there anything we can do to make it easier to resolve them at an earlier stage, at stage 1 of the process, please? Shall I give my second question?
Yeah,
before I
if you
have an
do,
answer?
yeah.
My second question then is about social services. And I noticed in the summary there that part of the underspend this year was due to the provision of the receipt of additional government grant funding. And it made me wonder, how reliant are we on government grants to support this budget? And is there any contingency built into the budget in the event that those grants don't come through in the next 12 months going forward? What's the contingency there? So that's my second question. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Edmonds first then, and then Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Miles, for the question. There isn't a single answer that can kind of cover all this. What I can do, if it helps, is I can give you some more detail, because the Governance and Audit Committee do kind of drill into formal complaints, and one of Rob Tranter's staff, Lisa Lane, does produce with complaints officers from each directorate quite a detailed analysis of complaints, lessons learned, reasons for them, etc., etc. It's probably better if I share that with you outside the meeting. There's a multitude of reasons why things go to stage 2. Sometimes it can be that we have a policy, might be relating to, I don't know, not accepting vans at household recycling centres, for example, but that's our policy. And members of the public are not happy with that policy, and even when it's explained to them as a policy, they still want to escalate the complaint. So it can be as simple as that. Sometimes it's more complicated than that. But I'm happy to share that information outside the meeting, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Jenkins, then, please. Oh, Mr. Harris is going to answer
Yeah,
this.
thank you, Chair. I'll give a more generic response to this. The value of the grants across all services, not just social care, is very high. We only normally get in-year approval, so obviously that's very difficult to manage. What we are doing as community and finance professionals is lobbying Welsh Government to put as many of these grants as possible into the financial settlement. There's been some progress on that, but not enough to date. And in answer to the second part of the question about a contingency, no, we don't have a contingency in the event of grants being withdrawn. Where that happens, service areas have to manage the financial impact.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay there, Ms Miles.
Yeah, I understand the answer, although the fact that we haven't got any contingency built in is a little bit of a worry, but thank you for the answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Etheridge, please. Can I congratulate you, Kevin, on your award? Well done.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. That's
Okay.
much appreciated. The two questions are for Mr. Edmonds. The first one I put in the chat is the where are we at with the buyback project in regard to PFI schools, in regard to discussions, cost and timescale. And the second one is regarding the school surplus budgets. Now, what methodology is in place regarding school budgets? I appreciate schools need to keep a reasonable surplus budgets in the cash flow, but obviously we are all working together for the benefit of the schools and the education. And if one school or many schools have got substantial amounts of money in their budgets, is there a methodology where we have regular discussions in order to help that school if they want if they want to develop like a new sort of area in the school, like a community garden, or they want a new prefabricated building with the classrooms? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Edmonds.
Chair, if I may, could I hand over to Steve Harris to answer the question on PFI in the first instance?
Thank you, Chair. The negotiations with the PFI contractor are at a sensitive stage. They're ongoing. It's very frustrating because there's a key piece of financial information that we need, but it's currently being withheld by the contractor. We have a further meeting scheduled for later this month, and if we are not given the information that we need, we will be progressing to formal adjudication. That's a very brief response, but it wouldn't be appropriate to say any more at this point.
Understand.
That'll mean additional costs, I assume, Steve, if we got to go there.
Not necessarily, because we did factor these sorts of delays in as a contingency. But clearly, once we get the information we need, we can recast the business case to ensure that the buyout option is the viable option and the right way to proceed.
Sorry, Gary, will that come back then to us on pink papers or something like that?
It will come back to scrutiny then, won't it?
The decision to conclude the termination has actually been delegated to officers. That was agreed last year, but you will receive a report once the deal is concluded, setting out the financial implications and the savings obviously arising from the termination.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Edmonds, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a couple of components to the question, Councillor Etheridge. I know we're in discussion particularly about the creation of a community garden at one of our schools. But I think you also touched on school balances and whether there's a mechanism for distributing some of those school balances out where perhaps some schools are heading towards deficit. So I'll cover a couple of parts of that off. I'll hand over to Sue then just to cover off the specifics in terms of how things like that could be funded. So you'll have picked up, no doubt, from the corporate performance assessment paperwork that the school balance position has decreased by 6 million in the last year. So I think it's fair to say that whilst schools had healthy balances post-COVID, that is now being eroded. We are seeing an increasing number of schools move into a deficit position. Okay, so that's a concern for us. When we have a school that's heading towards a deficit position, our financial requirements are that they work with the authority to develop a recovery plan. Under normal circumstances, that recovery plan is to get their budget back on track within 3 years. So we are flooding those schools with support to try and help get those budgets under control and back on track. What a lot of schools did with the funding that came in post-COVID was, as you said, stockpile it with a view to creating outdoor areas, additional features for the school. And indeed, many of our schools have done that. I think what I'd say at this point is it's getting increasingly challenging for that money to be used for those ends. But we do have other options available to our schools to try and add facilities into their kind of overall offer. And if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll just hand over to Sue to perhaps touch on things like 50/50 and other grant streams.
Yeah, Ms Richards, please.
Thank you. Just to clarify on what Councillor Etheridge said about schools with surplus balance, the same level of challenge is directed to schools with surplus balances, in that the finance team asked them to give a clear explanation on what those balances are going to be used for in the coming years. We also offer a 50/50 scheme, in that schools that feel they have money to put into specific projects, we will offer and match that funding as an authority. So a number of schools, they make a bid into us for match funding, and allows them to effectively develop schemes that will be unaffordable with just the school-based funding. Does that answer your query, Councillor Etheridge?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. I might come back to Steve Harris outside the meeting.
Yeah, that'll be
Thank
fine.
you.
Okay. Councillor Elizabeth Davis, please. Can you put your mic on, please, Liz?
Is that it? Am I on now?
Yeah, that's
Thank you
it.
very much. Sorry. I used to doing that. My points all relate to education, if that's okay. Yeah. I'm thinking about the need for additional learning needs in primary schools, particularly. It's greater now than it's ever been. When I was teaching, we never had the issues or challenges that they face today. And I'm wondering how we're going to support schools in meeting those needs if we're actually restricting their budgets. And I think that meeting those needs at primary education is extremely important for pupils moving forward. I wanted to know whether all of our primary schools are allowed, allocated a specific teacher responsible for ALN, and if so, are they receiving the correct remuneration for that responsibility, because it is a huge responsibility. I just would like that clarified. And then the next thing is, we were asked about having academic results for every school and measuring schools against one thing there. I think we learned the lesson of that a long, long time ago, where schools worked simply towards academic qualifications and weren't able to cope as well with children who were not going to particularly succeed academically, because school is not for every child. But a lot of those children go out from school and they succeed in many other ways. They become our plumbers, our electricians, our mechanics, and we need to be aware of teaching those skills as well. So we can't measure those skills in league tables, but we can measure them in the success that we see in our children that we've taught, and when we see them outside school doing work of that nature. So I feel to go back to league tables would be an adverse position for schools, because it would take things away from children who are doing really well in other ways. The other thing I wanted to look at is we're considering changing the transport of schools and changing the mileage for transport to school for children. I don't think that came up today, but it was on before. And could we have a little look at not one system suits everybody? Because if you live in an area like I do, where we've got pavements leading up to the schools, it's easy to have a walk to school bus. Everybody can do it. But you've got some people, I think Walter mentioned it a while ago, that in his area, to go to school from some areas in that area, you have to walk along narrow lanes without pavements. It's not possible if people haven't got a car to get there with a safe route. So I would like that looked into perhaps a little bit, so we don't have one method suits all. Maybe some people need a bit more support in some areas. Okay. That's it for me then, thank you.
Okay,
I don't know if you can answer anything, but
do you want to pass it to whoever?
I'll have a go, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah.
Sorry, they weren't really questions. They were just...
They're valid points, and I think I certainly want to offer some thoughts in response. But if it's okay with you, I'll work them in reverse order and hand over to Kerry for the last one. Okay, so In terms of the home to school transport, you'll have picked up that there's a decision going to Cabinet next week to look at the statutory provision and the discretionary provision. That is, if Cabinet decide to go down that route, the consultation will then go live on the 16th of September for a 6-week period. Naturally, we would be very keen to hear the views of everybody about those specific contexts that you refer to. And it's the consultation, I think, that will give us the best opportunity to get those points made. I think every ward across the borough will have slightly different circumstances and slightly different points to raise, but we'd encourage you as councillors, as individuals as well, to engage in that consultation. In terms of the school targets and tables, it's an interesting one because when I first started, those tables were used to demonstrate where we were in the grand scheme of things. And I think those of us who've been involved in education since that time would like nothing more at this point to be able to show where we've got to. However, I do completely agree that that was often a driver for teaching at specific grade boundaries or doing things that perhaps weren't in the best interest of everyone. So like you, I'm more pleased where we are now, but there is still a side of me that would like to be able to say, look, where we've got to. In terms of the last point you raised then around, or the first point you raised, sorry, around ALN, just one point of clarification before I hand over to Kerry. I think the language is quite key here. You mentioned that we are restricting school budgets. Just want to clarify, we are prioritising funding for schools, but as a result of the restrictions on all public sector finances at the moment, I think it's fair to say there's not enough to go around. So I think that's probably the reference I would prefer, but noting that wasn't your intention anyway. Kerry, do you want to pick up on the ALN stuff specifically? Because I think that was the majority of the first question. Thanks, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, it'd be an awful lot easier to answer these questions if our report had been published. That's the first thing I'll say, because it absolutely answers that question, Councillor Davis, and I completely agree. I think managing the ALN transformation has been the most worrying part of the whole year for schools. Due to the changes and due to schools' anxieties around funding and expertise, etc. What I can happily report to you is that, again, of the 33 inspections since COVID, every single one, bar one school, even the schools in statutory categories, have been, again, praised for the work in ALN. So the reality is that it's tough. It's really difficult. Staff are working really hard, but they are delivering on this agenda. We've certainly highlighted concerns around the workload on the ALN Co because it's absolutely changed, and a lot of schools now are trying to release ALN Cos as much as possible to do a lot of the paperwork and assessment. We've increased our teams within inclusion and changed roles so that schools have more access to educational psychologists, statutory officers, etc. But, you know, you would need to double or treble figures in any way to feel that there was some capacity in that. But again, I'll just reiterate, it's done well. What I'd also say is that you know, when you look at some of the comments in the reports, we also share our good practice across this country. Only recently, I think it was the week we were inspected, our statutory team were sharing their good practice with Wrexham, who are now coming down to learn from Caerphilly. And I'm sure when the report is published, there'll be more of that going on. I think that we've tried hard to look at processes to see how we can reduce workload in schools, how we can maximise funding. And one of the important things that we will be bringing through scrutiny and Cabinet next year, early next year, will be the delegation of additional support funding. Instead of schools having to go through a panel and bid for that money for individual pupils, which is what happens at the moment, schools will have a formula and they will be given that money up front, and they will be able to employ people, train people, and identify that provision across the schools so that they can respond to need more flexibly. It'll also release a lot of the time of the ALN Co and a lot of the time of the ALN staff, who can then be spending their time in schools supporting in classrooms and with head teachers and ALN Cos. So we are definitely planning for the future. We hope, of course, that there'll be additional funding coming through to support this further, but we very much have confidence in our schools to work well with what they have and make the best of the resources that they have. But I would be, disingenuous if I said that it hadn't caused anxieties and, a particular anxiety around, could we do better if we had more funding? Well, I'm imagining we could, but actually we do pretty well with what we've got as well. But it comes at its cost, and it's an opportunity for me to acknowledge the excellent work in our schools in regard to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your response, Kerry. It's very comprehensive, and it actually points out exactly what I was trying to say, that their staff are working extremely hard under very challenging circumstances. So let's hope we can support them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Enright then, please, next.
Thanks, Chair. I want to step away from education if I can, just for a minute.
Yeah.
I know we've had a number of conversations about workforce breakdowns and where we are as an organisation. I know we touched on a last scrutiny that you were thinking of approaching Ed, I'm assuming, to look at a standalone discussion around this. But I think focus on page 6, workforce breakdown. I think what that clearly evidences that there's a number of issues in both quarters, really, both retention and recruitment. I think if you look at the voluntary leave, averaged it over at 653 voluntary left the authority over the year. Total leave 846. That's 77% voluntary left the organisation, and that's a huge issue for me just looking at that. And I think if you look at the average leavers, where you've got 211 and a half over the year, new starters 251. So it's a positive to the 40, but I would have thought for an organisation of this size, that would clearly be, a huge issue. So it's really a plea rather than a question to come to the table really sooner rather than later. I'd love something this year, to get our heads around to see exactly where we are. So I'll just give you that as an observation, and perhaps Ed would want to come in with hopefully some positives there, how we're going to move that forward. But just a quick question, if I may. The last category there, percentage of headcount, percentage of what? I don't understand that last line. So if somebody can explain that, and then I've got another couple of areas that I want to touch on, if I can.
Okay, well, first on that there, Gary, we will be looking, because the report is there, and we will be looking for a special then, because he couldn't do it at the last thing, understandably, because Eston was more important. Not,
absolutely. Yeah.
It actually was, and but we will be looking at that there. Okay, Mr. Ed.
Step away from education, but not me. And thanks, Councillor Enright, for recognising the prominence of Eston. Just to reiterate what the Chair said, we will be coming back with a much more detailed look at workforce recruitment, etc., particularly for the Corporate and Regen Scrutiny Committee. I believe it's scheduled for September. I'm not entirely sure I understood the first part of your question in terms of those numbers, Councillor Enright, but perhaps we can chat about that outside of the meeting. The one bit I can confirm is the percentage of headcount figure at the bottom is actually the percentage of our headcount that is aged 55 and over. So that's just to give us an indication of the experience we have within the organisation. Again, look forward to chatting that through with you in September in more detail.
Yeah, we can do, no problem. The other couple of areas, free school meals, obviously I'm a governor like most councillors. We're finding a huge issue in my particular school. There's only a 17% take up of free school meals. Now, take the comment that you said it's moving forward positively. I still think there's a piece of work that needs to be done in regards to education and communication to remove a stigma around the free school meals. So it was really just to give you that, really, to say, yeah, I understand you're moving towards in a positive way, but there are still some areas of huge concern moving that forward, really.
Do I ask your other one then before we?
Yeah, the other one, Chair, makes reference economy and environment, about flood prevention. I'm going to be totally honest, I'm not seeing any positives within my particular ward, and I'm just going to be specific, really. Llanbradach is in a constant state of flood, probably October, November, when the silly season comes in, when we start getting, really bad weather due to poor conditions of the roads. I find it quite a reactive service where we're sort of leaving it to the members of the public to say, oh, that gully's full, that culvert's full, and then it's a reactive service then to come and clean it. I know there is a service out there that, you go around every couple of months and clean them, but I'm not finding it a very positive one, to be fair. Potholes, I'm struggling to get them filled. And as I said, then when the inclement weather comes, it's rolling off the hillside, and then we've got sort of rivers of water coming through under the train track. It's a bit of a nightmare. So it's really, again, a plea that if there are areas that you are throwing money at to prevent flood, keep an eye out for areas like Clanbraddock, who are in desperate need, to get the potholes filled, especially on Collier Road. I spent the last 2.5 years trying to get potholes filled on that particular road. It's crumbling, and as I said, when we get to the inclement weather, it's just absolutely crazy. So again, more of a plea rather than a question.
Okay. First of all, Ms. Richards will answer your first question, and then I'll ask Mark to have a say on the other one.
Thank you, Chair. As regards free school meals, with the rollout of primary universal free school meals, every child in a primary school is entitled to a free meal. The catering team has launched a new menu, which is certainly increasing our take-up. We're increasing now to the higher profile across Wales. And primary, there's no issue at all with Sigma because everybody gets a free meal. As regards secondary, we've got a cashless catering system, so that stigma is taken away completely. So I'm more than happy to speak to council outside the meeting just to understand exactly the issues in the particular school he's a governor of.
That's great. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quite a lot in there, Councillor Enright. I'll talk briefly about, we have a local flood risk management strategy. So I think that the reference you've picked up in the document relates to that. And that is about infrastructure like collapsing culverts, stuff that we need to put a bid into Welsh Government for. It needs to be risk rated in our strategy, stuff that we need to build that is crumbling. In terms of our highway network, we are no different to any other authority. Yes, our highway network is decaying. As a full council, you agreed a temporary saving of £1 million coming out of our highway resurfacing budget this year and last year. That does have a long-term effect on our highways, but it's something we've had to do in terms of balancing our budget. If you like Sue Richard said, if you want to talk to me offline about specific locations, gully emptying, there is a periodic, a cycle of gully emptying. Obviously, in the autumn, we have an immense amount of leaf fall that comes down on gullies, and we do rely on reporting to help us in terms of keeping at-risk gullies free of leaves. The routine gully emptying service cannot cope with leaf fall, just absolutely impossible. There's so many trees in this borough. The leaf fall is immense. So, it's very much, we target at-risk gullies that are going to cause flooding, and we do rely on local members of the public with that intelligence as well. But happy to talk offline about specific locations. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks, Mark. Yeah, great. Thanks, Chair.
Excellent. Okay, Councillor Bourbon, please.
Thank you, Chair. My query or question is with respect to social care, specifically in the area of what did not go well. But prior to that, I just want to say that I've noted the positive comments that we've heard on the times for care packages, coming down. In other words, waiting lists at hospitals then hopefully will be coming down, etc. And also that as a family, we've been using the services of our carers recently and the social care workers, and basically I'd like to thank everyone for such the professional support that we've received over the past few months. It's been fantastic. So there's no gripe here at all. With regards to social services, it's close to my heart. It always has been. So going specifically now to what did not go well, obviously I've picked up on the recruitment issues, without carers, particularly longer term. We don't want to go backwards if we're coming forwards in terms of bringing waiting times down for care packages, etc. But the fact that we've got continue to be a significant challenge with an increase in number of examples of CCBC falling behind neighbouring local authorities in terms of salaries. Now, to me, that is a concern, because it seems that if we can't recruit or we can't retain, again, we've talked about bits of this. What is it with salaries? So the question really is, what is it with respect to salaries in terms of what we pay and what other authorities pay? So that's my question, I suppose, in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jenkins, please.
Yep, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Owen, for the positive feedback in terms of the experiences that you've had. That is really helpful to know and positive. We'll pass that on to staff. Recruitment issues in specifically in terms of carers, but it's not just carers, is it? It's across the board. So carers is a particular challenge, but we're also having challenges with social care, social workers, and in other areas of the service. The issue around how we compare regionally isn't, of course, just for social care either. So the issue about salary scales is an issue that affects all council areas. So all services in parts are struggling with recruitment of key staff in certain roles and in certain professions and with certain qualifications. So it's a much bigger issue than just social care, if that's okay. We are looking at how we make the roles attractive. We've got really good HR policies that support us in terms of annual leave, flexi systems. We need to be promoting that. We've got a cohort of staff who, once they join Caerphilly, don't leave. We've also got some experience in social care recently of staff who have left for money and have come back because of the working conditions in Caerphilly being more positive. So we need to enhance that and utilise that to the best of our ability. In terms of care specifically, I don't know, Joe, whether there is anything that you wanted to add to that or whether that's sufficient.
No, what we are trying to do is different ways of recruiting. So now we've been able to go back to more face-to-face events and try and encourage people in sort of local venues and things, as well as job centres. So we're trying every avenue we can and working a lot with communications. And the other thing to add to what Gareth said is there is national work going on, looking at the pay of social workers in particular across Wales. So we're waiting for the feedback from that. But as Gareth said, it's not just the pay, it is about the other things like the annual leave, the flexible working, the good arrangements and support that we have, training and things like that for staff. But it is a challenge, as we alluded to. That's why it's in the things that we would want to improve next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Bob. I think it's the same across the private sector as well. It's not just local authorities.
100%, I agree. As I say, if we can bolt them down, please bolt them down.
Yeah, will do. Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Imran-Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. The first one was for social services, around hospital discharge and home care. I just wanted to ask, with regards to the assessment, is mental health taken into consideration equally with physical disabilities when it comes to assessing somebody's capabilities, basically, at home? That was the first question. And the second one, I just wanted to say I welcome any funding, all the funding that's become to Bargoed as a local member recently, and plans in the future with the events programme, very good events programme, and SPF funding for certain projects. I wanted to ask an officer and cabinet member, what benefits will placemaking plans bring to town centres such as Bargoed?
Okay, firstly, Joe Williams.
Yeah, I can completely reassure you that people's mental health is taken into account in any assessments around hospital discharge, and there are specific wards within the hospitals where people are there because of their mental health as well. So specific assessments are undertaken.
Okay, who wants to
Thank
do
you.
the, Mr. Street, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ingram-Jones. In terms of your issue around the sort of place shaping agenda, of course, that's the next item on this evening's agenda. So I'm sure we'll be able to pick up the queries you've got when we come to that report.
Marvellous. Thank you very much. Preempting.
Okay then, thank you very much, members. There's no other things, so we'll bring this to an end. The recommendation is on page 1 of your packs. Members review the corporate performance assessment and discuss, challenge and scrutinise the information contained when. I think we've done that tonight, members, and I think all the officers and all the ones that's online as well for attending. Very, very, very good. Very, very good. I enjoyed that. Okay, so thank you very much. We'll go on to the next item. Before then, if any officers not required, you're quite happy to leave. But we'll go to the next agenda item, item 4, mobilising Team Caerphilly, place shaping. Can I call the leader of council, Councillor Sean Morgan, to move it, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on the current place shaping programme. As you know, the place shaping programme is our strategy for delivering capital projects such as new schools, housing developments, sports facilities, and improvements to infrastructure necessary to enable residents of the borough to go about their daily lives. This report is also seeking scrutiny endorsement of the recommendations to Cabinet to allocate funding to the projects in the report. Members will know that both capital and revenue funding is reducing drastically, and as revenue funding gets squeezed, it becomes increasingly difficult to top up the capital pot from the revenue stream. You'll no doubt have heard me saying on many occasions you can only spend reserves once, and this is very much the case. This means that the council currently has more projects that it wants to deliver than it has capital funding to deliver. So as a result, Cabinet have had to make difficult choices to prioritise which projects should be taken forward and which will have to sit on a reserve list awaiting funding. To do this, we've looked at prioritising schemes that come with match funding in order to maximise our return on investment. By using the £9.2 million of available funding referenced in the report, the council will leverage in an additional £27.8 million of match funding. This will enable the completion of the projects outlined, which total almost £74 million worth of spend from a £20 million contribution from the council. The report also references a £7.2 million contingency for the overall almost £74 million capital programme, as we are all well aware of inflation, escalating costs, and of course any unanticipated hiccups. As much as it would be nice to be able to commit all of this to regeneration and new facilities, there are a number of health and safety asks in respect of flood alleviation issues that cannot be ignored. As I mentioned earlier, we depend on the necessary infrastructure that enables residents to go about their daily lives, and this is part of keeping that safe. Cabinet will be considering the allocation of this funding for the scheme set out in the report when it meets on the 24th of July, and we are seeking support from joint scrutiny on these allocations this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Leader. As the author, Miss Richards, do you want to say anything, or will I pass it on to Miss West? Yeah. If you can then answer maybe Dawn's question as well, same time.
Okay, I'll pass that over to Mark Williams to answer because it's his area.
Oh, right.
But I've got a presentation, Chair, to actually go through.
Okay. Didn't say they were doing a presentation. No, I didn't tell you, no.
We'll just go to questions. It just
Yeah.
summarises the report anyway.
Okay, no problem. Right, Mark, would you want to go?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ingram-Jones. So, police plans for our town centres are a condition of accessing Welsh Government town centre funding. So we have a town centre police plan called Caerphilly 2035 for Caerphilly Town, and we are obviously developing one for Blackwood and Bargoed. So not to confuse them with the wider plan, which is the master plan, which is, so for example, in Blackwood there's a Greater Blackwood master plan, but that covers areas like sort of Oakdale, Penmain, etc. These are specific town centre police plans that sit under the area master plan. Welsh Government liked the approach of town centre police plan that we adopted in Caerphilly, and they've now across Wales insisted the local authorities that they want to access town centre funding streams. Welsh Government grant police plans, town centre police plans have to be in place. So that's the substantial benefit of obviously setting out a strategy for the individual town, but also enables us to access Welsh Government grant funding. Thank you.
Okay, I know Councillor Jimmy Pritchard, the Deputy Leader and covering this area, will let you say something.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to follow on from what Mark Williams said, I mean, the first point I want to make in Great Britain, really, town centres are struggling. Doesn't matter if it's an affluent area, across the board. So we need some forward-thinking sort of objectives, a real plan forward in it to enable our town centres to advance and to attract further funding. Many residents will say you need to invest in the town centre, and of course we do. We want to invest in all our town centres, but it's external funding, not council funding. Council funding is an element of it, but we need to have a plan in place in order to attract that Welsh Government funding and any other funding. So this is really good news for both Bargoed and Blackwood. We're advancing these two plans, and I thank Councillor Ingram-Jones for her question. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I must say, you know, from a point of view, if you've got 20 million and someone says, I'll give you 50 if you invest that there, you know, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? You know, and that's a 70 million, you know, investment in our borough. It's absolutely brilliant. Okay, I don't see any hands up, members. So can I have a mover and a seconder then, please, for the report? Yeah, Councillor Angel. Councillor Lee Jeremiah, second it. Thank you very much. Okay, before we go to the vote, and it will be in person vote, the recommendations are on page 32 of your packs. Members are asked to A, note the information contained in the report, support the remuneration to Cabinet to utilise 9.211 million of unallocated capital funding to support the progression of the projects set out in 5.5.2, and C, Cabinet support a recommendation to Cabinet to agree that 7.020 million of the unallocated capital be set aside as contingency for the overall capital programme. Okay, so to the vote then, please. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Adams.
I support that one, Chair.
Councillor Aldworth. Councillor Angel. Councillor Bishop.
4.
Councillor Broughton Pettit.
She's left.
Councillor Chacon Dawson.
4.
Councillor Chapman.
4, Chair.
Councillor Cook. Councillor Cushing. Councillor Cass.
4.
Councillor Elizabeth Davis. Councillor Tudor Davis. Councillor Dix. Councillor Ellsbury. Councillor Enright.
4.
Councillor Etheridge. Councillor Mark Evans,
4, Chair.
Councillor Freena Childs,
4,
Councillor Christine Forehead, Councillor Fussell, Councillor Gare,
4,
Councillor Heron,
4, Chair.
Councillor Haas,
4,
Councillor Hussey,
4,
Councillor Ingram Jones,
4,
Councillor James, Councillor Leroy Jeremiah,
4,
Councillor Johnston,
4,
Councillor Jan Jones,
4,
Councillor Kent, Councillor Mann, Councillor McConnell,
4,
Councillor Miles,
4,
Councillor Owen,
4,
Councillor Powell,
4,
Councillor Hayden Pritchard,
4,
Councillor Judith Pritchard,
4,
Councillor Rayo, Councillor Roberts,
Obliged, 4,
Councillor Sorales, Councillor Scriven, Councillor Simmons,
4, Chair.
Councillor Taylor, Councillor Whitcomb,
4,
Councillor Whittle, Councillor Shane Williams,
4,
Councillor Walter Williams,
he left.
Councillor Winslade,
4,
Councillor Woodland,
4,
Councillor Wright,
4,
Martin Weston, Tracy Millington,
4,
Gowan James. That's carried unanimously, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And Leader, what can I say? And to the Cabinet and to our directors, this is a winner. Everyone, no supporting this. So big hopes resting on it. So time to deliver. Isn't it? Okay, thank you all for coming this evening, members. You can now go out and enjoy the sunshine. So have a good evening and thank you for attending. Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks, everyone.